Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the OGM podcast. This is where we explore cutting edge ideas that are shaping the future of the energy industry. I'm your host, Tina Olivero. Today, we're diving deep into the most critical issues of our time, climate change. And we're going to be talking about how oil and gas companies are adapting to the global call for climate action. Joining us today is Dr. Ian Palmer. He's a petroleum engineer with over 38 years of experience. He's a Forbes contributor and the author of a groundbreaking new book called How Oil and Gas Companies Are Pivoting Towards Climate Change. Ian, thank you so much and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tina. Glad to be here.
Yes, can you start with giving us a little bit of your career history, what landed you to where you are today, creating this book and the release of your new book?
I was a high school teacher for 3 years, went back to graduate school, got a PhD in physics, and it was a study of the sun, the solar system, and cosmic rays from the sun, how they travel to Earth. So that was kind of far out.
Yeah, interesting.
I got a job in the U.S. in Los Alamos, New Mexico, the place where they made the bomb, and worked there for just 1 year, but couldn't stay because I was an Australian citizen. But it moved to Tulsa, a small religious college there, and that was a big center for oil and gas. Amoco had a big research center there. I got interested in that, and I designed a fracking model. So I jumped into fracking, of all things controversial,
Right.
and worked in that area for many years. Eventually retired, and then Oklahoma was experiencing a lot of earthquakes related to fracking, and I got interested in that, and I'll talk about that, one of your questions, later. But then after that, I turned, that kind of led me, the environmental aspects of that led me into climate change, and I thought, I really want to find out about this. What I found out was it was incredibly complicated. It's a huge subject, and there's lots of material written, pages and pages, hundreds of pages. And so very difficult and I was just focused on the oil and gas aspects of it.
Right.
How much oil and gas to blame. And so I thought I need to write this up. And so I began writing. I'd been writing to Forbes.com it's my 4th year now. And I thought I can make a book about this, about effects on oil and gas industry and how they're moving towards climate change. And so I did. And my goal was to simplify things. And one last thing was that a colleague read the book from front to back. He's an attorney, so didn't know much about oil and gas, attorney out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And he gave a very nice review saying, I needed to read this book. I didn't know all of this stuff. You've simplified it and you've made it understandable to the man on the street. So it's written to bridge that gap, not just to experts, because there's a lot of expertise in there, but also to people on the street. So that's how it came about.
Fantastic. And I really think that's what we need to do is bridge the gap from the technical side of oil and gas, technical side of climate change and considerations, and make that mainstream for all people. So good for you for doing that. First and foremost, it's also what we try to do here at the OGM is make things understandable, relevant, and applicable. So yeah. Now, having worked in the oil and gas industry myself as well for 3 decades and working with major operators, major contractors, from your research, how do you see companies reacting to the growing demands for climate change solutions?
I can address that at 2 levels. First, small oil and gas companies, and a colleague who's a small operator in Oklahoma said that his concern is the value of the company. Will the company be devalued as renewables are coming in? He's 60 years old, so he's heading for retirement, and he's very concerned. And so that's one reaction right there. But he told me about some of his buddies who are like in their 30s, and they're just getting into it, and they just believe that oil will be needed forever. So they're not really even show no concern about the fact that oil may be displaced by renewables, and so that there's a real contrast there. That's small operators. When I go to big operators, and I've worked for corporate like that, their general approach, this is making it simpler, is to okay, cut emissions, okay, but don't cut drilling, okay. And so some of these people don't really believe in global warming. Other people think, it's a long way away, it's not going to affect me in my lifetime. And bottom line is, we don't want to cut drilling. That's our business, and you can understand that. That's very understandable. And so, one last comment in Europe, the government have a closer relationship to oil and gas companies, and they've offered contracts with sticks. In other words, influence with sticks. In other words, laws. If you don't do this, and so they've emphasized that to try to cut back emissions to go to climate change. In the U.S., we use carrots, and so there's some big government bills that have come down that enormous amounts of money, $500 billion, and to help major companies get into climate change. So.
Yeah, how to convert. But it is, like you said, such a huge topic. Some people say, it's not about stopping production, it's about reaching net zero and the technology and innovation that's going to get us there. Some people say, oil and gas industry is finished. And like somewhere in between all of that is how we move forward, but it's very difficult to predict the future. So what strategies are you seeing that are starting to be implemented right now, so that energy companies, are staying competitive, are staying in business? And how do we navigate all of this uncertainty?
Well, for small investors, I think it's more difficult because it's their lifeline, their business, and its jobs. And my advice to them, the strategy-wise, is to sell gradually or whatever before the demand goes down, because that's coming, and I'll address that a little more later, because of EVs and things like that. And so maybe also find renewables to invest in, community solar systems, or maybe even CCS opportunities, carbon capture and storage, on their properties, on their oil properties, which are very good for doing that. The larger companies, I can illustrate. BP has been one of the leaders, British-based. They announced that they would be 40% renewables by 2030. That was a couple of years ago, but their stock price went down as a result of that. And so they've cut that back to 25%. So they're one of the most integrated companies, really trying to get into renewables. Exxon, the biggest company, ExxonMobil, they've dedicated to cutting emissions, and that's the easiest part of addressing climate change. But they also have jumped on hydrogen, making hydrogen, which produces CO2, which they need to use carbon capture and storage. And so they're the world expert in that, carbon capture and storage, and they want to make money out of that too. Oxy is another company, Occidental. They have direct air capture. They actually capture CO2 from the air, which sounds like that would be the great way to go. And they've Warren Buffett has funded them and bought stock there, quite a lot of it actually. They're building big plants in West Texas. You've got some government money there. They imagine 100 of these plants by 2035, franchised operations. And after that, across the world, 1,000 such plants. The only problem is that this is not making a big difference. They don't pull out enough to make a big difference. So anyway, that's a summary of the strategies.
Mm-hmm. So your book outlines efforts to clean up carbon emissions. Can you highlight some of the most promising technologies that you think are going to accelerate the transition? What's our low-hanging fruit?
Yes. Emissions from operations are the lowest hanging fruit. In other words, first of all, the engines that do fracking, they use diesel, which is very polluting, and that they could use. They could switch over to gas, CNG, or even solar and wind, clean electricity. Then there's the direct air capture that I mentioned from Oxy. There's another. Well, the critical thing is to reduce drilling, because the oil and gas industry across the world produces 57%, I think, of the global energy and 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So you can clean up your operations, your footprint, but you're selling oil and gas to other places, other countries, that when it's burned, that produces most of the emissions, like 75% of it. So how do you do that? Basically, you've got to bury those emissions, as in carbon capture and storage, bury them deep underground, and hope that they never come out. But that's to build a business big enough to do that. It won't ever save oil and gas, because it's going to make oil and gas too expensive to do that. So it has limited help, but it won't save oil and gas. The final thing is to stop drilling, to reduce drilling. And a country like Denmark, which does produce a lot of oil from the North Sea, they're no longer prospecting for oil in the North Sea. They've given up on that. And by 2050, they won't be producing any. So they're going to switch their people. What about jobs? And that switch them into offshore drilling, which is a good solution for them. So there's some of the things that you can do, but to reduce drilling, that's the huge challenge.
Especially where we have a rising population at the same time. It seems like we need all energy in the energy mix to support the demand for energy worldwide. It's like, I'm not really sure how it's all going to fare out, because, I mean, I think population growth and energy demand are driving all of this.
Yes, and that's well established that world energy is going to continue to increase. Okay, so but the emissions thing is threatening, because right now the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere are higher than they've been for 1 million years. And that's what causes the global warming and the climate change. If we don't do anything by the end of the century, 2100, temperature will be higher than it's been for 1 million years. Are we going to take that chance? Are we willing to take that chance? And mostly the answer is no. So Yeah. Okay. So
So I'm wondering if technology and innovation will save the day. For example, our whole electric vehicle infrastructure that's coming up. One of the pivotal points in the energy transition will be the rise of electric vehicles. So, when do you foresee electric vehicles having a significant impact on oil demand?
uh, this is becoming better defined, in my opinion. There's lots of controversy about this, but President Biden wants in the U.S. 50% of new vehicles to be electric or plug-in hybrid by the year 2030, which is just 6 years away.
Mm-hmm.
This would mean a 17% drop in demand for oil within the USA. That's very significant, 17%. Similar argument for removing all the coal and power stations and gas that cause the emissions. That would drop gas demand by 30% by 2030. These are really significant things. So
Yeah.
the electric vehicles are expanding worldwide, globally. It's an exponential increase. China's been a big cause of that. They're increasing like crazy. The US is slow. Australia is slow. The numbers in the US were, let's see, by next year, 21, we're 10% now. 10% new vehicles are electric. By 2025, it'll be 20%. By 2030, it's supposed to be 50% by Biden's guideline. So this was a slow year. I would say that within 2 years, 2025 is when we're going to see that signal is going to hit strongly the oil and gas company, and they're going to have to do something about that.
Will be very interesting to see if that happens, because there's some people that are right on the wagon with electric vehicles, and other people just say, you know what, it's not worth it. The infrastructure's not here. It's not happening. It's not happening fast enough. It's inconvenient. There's all kinds of opposition too. So it's a strange time. It's a very, very strange time.
It is. And politics, comes into it too, of course. And so that's a separate question, I guess. But yeah. No, it's one of the reasons I wrote the book. It's it's kind of a confusing time, and I've tried to reduce some of that confusion. I will add this: BP have done more studies on, looked at the data more than anybody has.
Yeah.
And their predictions, I think, are the best. Okay. And they say that, speaking about oil only, business as usual, if it's business as usual, electric vehicles will drop by 2050. This is worldwide, global, not US, global, will drop by 20%. If it's not business as usual, but if the world gets serious about net zero by 2050, it will drop to 30%. Okay, it will drop by 70% to 30%, and BP are thinking that's more likely than business as usual, and I agree with that. So that's the seriousness of it right there.
Yeah, I think that's right too. And I remember like decades ago going to ADIPEC and BP being light years ahead, ADIPEC in the Middle East, oil and gas show, BP being light years ahead of most of the top energy operators when it came to, searching for new environmentally friendly protocols. Right. It just it was so ironic because it was roughly around the same time that, they ended up with that big oil spill, and it was such a shame that it happened to them and their one of the projects they were involved in. But I mean, they have truly been leaders when it comes to their studies, their information, their research, and being able to predict markets. So I definitely think they're worth paying attention to, as you say. So
Yes, they nearly lost that company,
yeah.
BP, but they saved it, and a few years later they bought properties. I think it cost them $8 billion. So, and they are truly the leader in the sense that hydrogen and CCS, a Teesside industrial place in England, very strong on making hydrogen for those hard to abate industries, aviation and shipping and chemical manufacturing, but also CCS. They use that to get rid of the CO2 byproducts when they make the hydrogen. And now they're in Australia, the biggest green hydrogen project across the world, northwest in the iron ore country, and they're gonna, they'll be using wind and solar to make the electricity, and then that'll drive the electrolyzers to make the green hydrogen. They'll sell that everywhere within Australia, the hard to abate sectors, but also Southeast Asia. They're going to be big. And Southeast Asia, have a tremendous demand for hydrogen. And so BP, right, they have shown the true leadership here.
They have. Do you think that hydrogen is going to take the place of the oil and gas industry?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do you think that hydrogen will be the next energy sector that's sort of going to replace the oil and gas industry?
No, I don't. Hydrogen has always been the answer for the hard to abate industries. As I said, shipping, aviation, manufacturing of steel, cement, chemicals, fertilizer, and so that is limited. It's only 15% of the decarbonization that is necessary for globally. It's only 15%. Hydrogen can also be used for cars. Japan, have a fuel cell hydrogen cars, and California even have a few. But it won't go much more than 15%. It's expensive, even with the big government grants over here. And so I can't see, and there are other projections out there, it will be, it's too expensive to make much of a difference beyond that 15%. So it won't save the oil and gas companies, no.
Okay. So, and in terms of your book outlines efforts to clean up carbon emissions, what are the most promising technologies that you see that's going to accelerate that transition?
New technologies. Methane sat is a private company called EDF has built that, and that's up in the sky now. Okay, it can detect emissions, very even small emissions, and that's going to be free. The data will be free, and so it will help companies to identify their sources. And by that I mean wellheads leaking, methane leaking, storage tanks, pipelines leaking. These leaks are easy to fix, and so that's one of the big ones. That data will be free as of next year, and I expect. And also regulators, of course. There's some very good EPA regulations out there now to control methane emissions. And so the other things I can think of are geothermal. Okay, this is a switch, but it's not too hard to imagine oil and gas companies that are so good at drilling wells switching to fund geothermal. Switching some of the capex to geothermal, and Fervo is a company out of Nevada that has drilled two horizontal wells, and they pump water through fracks that connect the two horizontal wells and then flow back up the surface. They've been very successful. They're providing some of this energy to the network, to the grid in Nevada. So that's going to be a big one. They've managed to control this really, really well. DOE have another project in Utah also, Utah, and they're making very good progress there too. So unfortunately, geothermal it's less than 1% of our clean energy. So it's too late, too little, too late to be able to really. But still, for oil companies to get into that, that the other one is offshore wind systems. Okay, I mean, oil and gas companies, they do offshoring all the time. And so to work with platforms to produce offshore wind, that's a natural innovation that they could move into.
Yeah, natural transfer of technology for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I see geothermal coming up as well on the horizon. Of course, lots of offshore wind. They're succeeding really well on the east coast of the U.S. there. Canada needs to catch up in that regard for sure. But yeah, anything else?
I think I would just say that there's a lot more in the book. Okay, what we've discussed here is only a part. There are 21 chapters, and each chapter points out the pros and cons and draws a conclusion. Okay, some of them are not definitive conclusions, but each chapter has a conclusion, and so and as I said before. It's for experts to get a better understanding of how oil and gas companies across the board are pivoting toward climate change. But it's for people on the street too to get a real understanding. They might have to jump over some of the technical stuff, but it's a great place to start to get a real understanding of where oil and gas industry sits right now.
Right. So you heard it up there, folks. The book is How Oil and Gas Companies Are Pivoting Towards Climate Change. And I think it has, based on our conversation, a lot of great, valuable insight and advice. And how do people get it?
My website is the best way, and it's iandexterpalmer.com. My full name, iandexterpalmer.com. And right now,
Palmer.com.
Yes.
iandexterpalmer.com.
Right. And there's the link in there where how you can buy the book. So yes, that's the way to get it. Mm-hmm.
That's perfect. And what type of people are buying the book now at this point? Who's reading it?
Well, it's both of that spectrum that I mentioned. Okay, so people on the street are reading it and gaining from it. They jump over some of the more technical things, but the industry, people in the industry, we're making big marketing moves in there to because that's if it's people who are working anywhere near these areas, they need to know about it, and they will appreciate it. So it's the whole spectrum, really, the whole spectrum.
Gotcha. Before we sign off, Ian, I just wanted to sort of get a glimpse into what you felt as we look into the future of opportunities and innovation for oil companies. What do you think is there, what do you think we're going to see in terms of adaptation, innovation, quick solutions right off the gate? I know we've touched on it in varying ways, but I just sort of want you to look into the future of the next 5 years and say, this is what we can expect.
I would, two words, be prepared, okay, because it's coming. Renewables are coming, and there's no question about that. And because of electric vehicles, oil demand will be falling, okay?
Mm-hmm.
If we want to stop global warming, we have to stop producing oil and gas. that sounds like a heavy statement. You can install, thousands of renewable projects. That won't stop the greenhouse gases that come from 50% of them come from oil and gas. Okay, so the long-term future is that's going to fall as BP predicts. Down near below 50% by 2050, and so right. I guess that's the main thing I want to say about that. It's happening. So be prepared, be proactive. Okay, if you're a small company, sell off some of your poor producing wells. If you're a big company, clean up your website, the emissions from your web. Use methane SAP. Okay, think about going to geothermal. Think about investing in geothermal. Think about carbon capture and storage. Combining with other groups, local entities, other oil and gas companies to build a solar community. Okay, there's some of the things right there.
Right. Yeah. Good advice from a wise soul. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about today? I think we had a really interesting conversation.
I think that's it. I appreciate the opportunity, Tina.
Yes.
That's your questions were well crafted, and they were right on the money, I think. So I appreciate the opportunity to answer them and to point out a book that has a lot of answers, a lot more than we've talked about. There's a lot more answers in there. Batteries, I'll finish with this. Batteries are a big deal. Exxon are drilling wells to make lithium, to make batteries. So that was an innovation I forgot to mention. South Australia, my home state, lead the world in renewable electricity. They are producing 72% of their electricity is from renewables, from solar and wind. I'll finish with this story. In 2016, they had a blackout. The entire state was blacked out. I was there eating in a restaurant. Had to drive home through the dark. No street lights, no house lights, no other cars. It was like the end times. Soon after that, a tech billionaire from Australia had a bet with Elon Musk, who knows about batteries. And this guru from Australia said, I'll make a bet you can't build a big grid battery that can stop the state from blacking out. And Musk, being Musk, accepted that and built the Hornsdale grid battery, the first and the biggest of its kind in the world, 35 miles from my hometown. So that was kind of a proud moment for me.
Interesting. So interesting. We're going to have to do a whole show on that Hornsdale battery.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yep. We could.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us on the show and for providing people with insights into this critical energy transition. It really is the most important conversation of our time. Folks, for people who are interested in what Ian had to say, his thoughts, his accumulation of knowledge, his wisdom, the book, How Oil and Gas Companies Are Pivoting Towards Climate Change, is available. And I'm your host, Tina Olivero, with the OGM. Stay tuned for more discussions on innovation and the future of our energy transition. So until next time, over and out.